We are used to thinking that today's science and technology are more advanced than ever. However, hundreds and thousands of years ago, there were inventions that science still cannot explain to this day. Some believe that extraterrestrial civilizations or even mystical creatures are responsible for creating these technologies. Whether this is true or not, we will try to explain in this video. Greek fire. This was the secret weapon of the Byzantine Empire, which still generates a large number of theories. Although more than 1,000 years have passed, Greek fire was a destructive weapon that the Byzantine Empire used against its enemies, especially in naval battles. The reason for this was that it was so flammable that it was simply impossible to extinguish it with water. There are records that when it came into contact with water, the combustion became even more active. What really amazed people about Greek fire was that armies could capture this hot mixture from the Byzantines, but they couldn't recreate it. They also couldn't recreate the weapon that ignited Greek fire. And that's not surprising, because to this day, no one knows exactly what ingredients were in the flammable mixture. Greek fire was created in the 7th century by an inventor from Byzantium named Callinicus. It is believed that he experimented with various materials until he found the perfect flammable mixture. He then sent the formula to the Byzantine emperor. When the emperor received the formula, he ordered the development of weapons based on it. Thus, the siphon was created, the same cannon that sent deadly fire towards the enemy. Greek fire also had a strong psychological effect on the enemy. It made a loud roar and a large amount of smoke, very similar to the breath of a dragon. Because the weapon was effective against the enemy, the formula was kept strictly secret by the Byzantines. Later, based on it, a modification of this weapon was created in the form of grenades. And although many opponents tried to reproduce the secret of Greek fire, none of them succeeded. To this day, no one knows the secret formula for this flammable mixture. There are various assumptions about the technology, components, but researchers do not have an exact answer. Damascus steel. For many centuries, legends have been circulating about the steel from Damascus. Swords made from this material were incredibly strong, sharp, and could break the swords of competitors in battle. As a result, the owner of a weapon made from Damascus steel became practically invincible. For a long time, even with modern technology, scientists were unable to unravel the secret of Damascus steel. The material itself was mined in India, then forged in the Middle East, and then sold in Damascus. This continued for many centuries. In addition to incredible strength and sharpness, Damascus swords were distinguished by an unusual pattern on the surface, something similar to a ripple. European wars learned about Damascus steel during the Crusades in the 11th century and were impressed by their sharpness and strength. But most importantly, no one could understand the secret of Damascus steel. No one in the world could replicate such a weapon. There were many theories about this, including the strangest ideas. Some suggested that the metal was first fed to chicks, then collected from their droppings. Another theory was that after forging, the sword was thrust into the body of a muscular slave to transfer his strength to the metal. These crazy theories arose only because even scientists did not understand how Damascus weapons were made. Gradually, firearms became widespread, and swords became less relevant. Therefore, the secret of producing Damascus weapons was lost. Moreover, blacksmiths were able to replicate the distinctive ripple seen on Damascus swords, but they could not make the weapons as strong and sharp. The discovery of the secret of Damascus steel occurred by chance only 40 years ago. Scientists were experimenting with creating super strong and elastic metals, and were able to reproduce the quality of those legendary Damascus swords. However, to achieve this result, scientists were only able to use the most advanced technologies to control temperature and chemical composition. To this day, it is unclear how it was possible to forge Damascus swords 1,000 years ago without modern production methods. One theory is that Damascus steel was quenched in the blood of dragons. Scientists, of course, are skeptical of this idea. However, the author of the famous Game of Thrones was inspired precisely by the story of Damascus steel when coming up with his own fictional version, the Lycurgus cup. This Roman cup, which is kept in the British Museum for 1600 years, is known as the Lycurgus cup. This glass cup is named after the scene depicted on it, which involves King Lycurgus of Thrace. Initially, when it is illuminated from the front, it is clearly green in color, but when the light falls on the cup from behind, it becomes distinctly red. This amazing property puzzled scientists for decades after this artifact came into their hands 70 years ago. This mystery was solved only recently. Researchers from Britain carefully examined the fragments under a microscope and discovered that Roman craftsmen were pioneers of nanotechnology. Over 1,500 years ago, they realized how to impregnate glass with particles of silver and gold, grinding the particles to an incredible size, which is about 1,000th the size of a small grain of salt. Such an approach meant that the Romans were fully aware of what they were doing. Here's how this nanotechnology works. When light falls on the cup, the electrons of the metallic particles interact in such a way that the color of the object begins to change depending on the position of the observer. According to the researchers' assumptions, the cup also changed color depending on the drink poured into it. I remind you again that this technology is over 1,500 years old. Just imagine what an effect it had on contemporaries. But the most interesting thing is that this ancient technology can be used by scientists in the future to invent incredibly sensitive sensors that will help detect dangerous diseases at the earliest stage or detect criminals who are smuggling illegal substances. Mysterious underground object in Malta. At the beginning of the 20th century, builders were digging a sewer and accidentally came across an amazing underground structure. At first, they did not understand what they had encountered and started using the place as a dump. However, shortly afterward, this caught the attention of scientists, and it turned out that this structure, called Halsaflieni, is over 6,000 years old. According to archaeologists, ancient inhabitants of Malta built this place for collective burials. Corridors and chambers for bodies were carved out of soft limestone. The temple consisted of several levels. Scientists speculate that lavish funeral processions were held here. In total, Halsaflieni became the burial site for several thousand people. Beads, amulets, ceramics, and carved figurines were found next to their remains. Several halls are still decorated with black and white chessboards and other ancient drawings. However, one of the most interesting and mysterious things discovered inside the temple are skulls of an unusually elongated shape. Moreover, the shape is not the only anomaly of these skulls. Sutures and swellings on the occiput are also abnormally developed. The cause of these anomalies was shrouded in mystery. Serious speculations were made that these were the remains of extraterrestrials, as this anomaly is too strange for humans. This fact was further mystified by the skulls being exhibited in the Malta Museum until 1985. Later, they were removed from public access and required special permission to view. Obtaining this permission was far from simple. All this further convinced supporters of mystical theories that the skulls did not belong to the human race. Elongated skulls were found in different parts of our planet, such as South America, but scientists there were confident that they were the result of intentional deformation. In some cultures, this was done for religious and aesthetic reasons. The skulls were bound during the growth of a person, and they became elongated. However, with the elongated skulls from the Maltese temple, it is not that simple. Researchers found out that they are not the result of artificial deformation. This fact further convinced supporters of the extraterrestrial theory. The Maltese authorities, based on the conclusions of local scientists, believed that the skulls were not extraterrestrial and were a result of natural deformation. This fact further convinced supporters of the extraterrestrial theory. The authorities of Malta, relying on the conclusions of local scientists, assert that the skull data undoubtedly belongs to humans. However, the reason for its unusual shape remains a mystery. By the way, share your opinion in the comments. Do you believe in the existence of alien civilizations? Let's see how widespread this idea is. Ancient flying machine. Many of you have heard about flying machines designed by the famous artist and inventor Leonardo da Vinci. However, centuries before da Vinci was born, ancient India had its own flying machine projects, and some are convinced that these machines were not just imagined, but also built. We are talking about so-called Vimanas, flying chariots mentioned in ancient Indian texts. According to these texts, Vimanas came in different sizes and shapes, and they could not only fly but also swim and move on the ground. In addition, Vimanas regulated their speed and traveled quite a considerable distance. Data on the construction of Vimanas and their basic principles of control have also been preserved. Moreover, there are Indian historians who are convinced that similar devices were definitely built in ancient India and were even used as weapons. Another hypothesis is that Vimanas were not created by humans. They entered ancient Indian texts because people observed extraterrestrial objects that landed on our planet. Scientists generally view the idea of such machines existing in the ancient world quite skeptically and consider them nothing more than fictional mythical objects. And given that in some texts it was claimed that Vimanas had the ability to fly, including to the moon, they were most likely nothing more than fantasies. Don't forget to like if you found this video interesting. Also subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon to always stay updated on new videos, and of course, share this video with your friends.